people expect a miraculous change within 1 or 2 visits, and that's not how it works. If it's taken you years to get into a state of degeneration where you're not functioning properly, in essence, then it's also going to take a bit of time for you to get back out of that pattern. I mean, life is patience. It's hard. I'm an impatient person, but the body needs some time to recover. You need to give it some tools. And that's the thing with chiropractic. When I treat the patient, it's not me who's doing the magic. It's their body who's doing the magic. The only thing I have done is give a little impulse, give a little bit of information of what the body needs to kind of restore its balance.
Hello and welcome. Today I'm here with Maike. Maike is chiropractor. She's doing chiropractic. She's adventurer, rock climber, motorcyclist.
Yes.
And she speaks 5 languages actively and now learning 6th one.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. That's a lot. That's
Thank you.
a lot of things. So, we'll probably just talk about every bit of it somehow and wherever we'll go. First thing first, always, how did you get into sport and activity?
Okay, so...
And what was your first sport or activity you were doing?
Okay, so I started with the world of sports thanks to my father. We have always been a pretty active family, but our main sport as a family was windsurfing. So that was the first thing I learned. We would always go to the beach in the summer, and I really started there to understand, the dynamics, the flow, the water, the wind, the sail. And it's actually one of the hardest sports I've ever done because you have to be kind of stubborn. You have to understand the dynamics to use the wind to your favor. And it's not an easy sport. I didn't really get the hang of it until I was around, 14 or so. So I started when I was 7, but I didn't really get the hang of it until I was 14.
There was some persistence there.
Yeah, I'm stubborn. I'm known for my stubbornness.
Okay, so what do you mean you need to be stubborn there? Like it either goes or doesn't, right?
I just think, stubbornness can be both good or bad, right? I see it both positive and negative in my case, where when I have a project, I will take it through. I will persist until it gets done. But sometimes that stubbornness, right? Just being so focused on a goal, sometimes it takes you through walls instead of around walls. And that's also a negative attribute. Yeah.
Well, that's a nice way of putting it. Okay, so windsurfing, that was it? And then...
There was windsurfing. I also started running when I was around, 15 or so. I didn't like running at first. Like at the beginning, when I was running 10 minutes, I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. I hated every minute of it, and I would go with my father. But then something clicked. So I started to do track and field, athleticism. I don't know, in Spanish they say atletismo. And I started doing track and field races. I started discovering a little more of the world of mountain, trail running, and I got hooked. So I started learning the passion for running. And a little bit later, also around 16, 17, I got into the world of rock climbing. But that also has to do with my family because my grandfather was a rock climber. My father was a rock climber. And I just think the passion was in our veins. So I also discovered that side.
And to that point, you were not doing it?
No, not until I was around 16 or 17.
And why? Why that changed? Like your dad was rock climbing or he took a break?
My father rock climbed when he was in his 20s and 30s. And then he gave it up simply because he didn't have his rock climbing partner anymore. So when I'm talking about rock climbing, it's not the rock climbing that you do in the gyms. It's really going to the mountains.
Rock climbing, not wall climbing.
Wall climbing, exactly. Yeah. So you have your belay partner, and it is a very special relationship because you are essentially putting your life on the line. So you need to really trust your partner. Yeah. So, sorry, going back to the question, my father rock climbed when he was in his 20s, 30s. And I didn't really discover it until I found my first partner. And in Barcelona, there were a few rock climbing gym centers, and we tried it out, and I really liked it. And that's how I got introduced to the world of rock climbing.
And how did your dad lose his rock climbing partner? When you said like it wasn't some accident or something?
No, no. I just meant that, throughout life, he got a career,
All right. Okay.
family, etc.
So it wasn't like something bad happened and that's
No,
why
nothing bad
okay.
happened. It's just life kind of takes you along.
Yeah.
And he later found his passion for windsurfing. Yeah. So he kind of left rock climbing to the side, then got into the world of windsurfing. And that is what he taught us first.
Sorry. Okay. And so what do you identify yourself as? A runner or rock climber or all of it? Just like overall very skilled and I tried everything type of athlete?
Honestly, if you ask me right now, I would identify more as a mountain person and a CrossFitter, because when I talk about rock climbing, so there's definitely the climbing, but I've also done alpinism, which is essentially in extreme terrains with ice, with grampones. I don't know how you call it. There's the spiky shoes and the axe, right? So
Grampones?
Yeah, I don't know what it's called in English, but
Well, spiky shoes is just fine.
yeah,
us,
spiky shoes. That'll work. So I got into that world as well after rock climbing, and it really gave me quite a bit of overall terrain experience, to deal with any type of mountains, any type of situations, to learn how to use ropes, different tools. And then I also consider myself a CrossFitter because I discovered this right before COVID, and I really enjoy it. I think, it's
so
my
like
new
2019?
passion. Yeah, 2019. That's right.
I want to ask you more about the alpinism and this because you told me before you went for like a couple of days on your own,
Yes.
mountains,
Yes.
different terrain,
Yeah.
taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
How you get to that point that you go on your own, you are confident to go on your own? Because I suppose that it's not like first thing you will do, you'll just read a book and then you go on your own for 3 days, right?
No. I mean, but it is true that, for example, I did have some inspiration from a few books. I don't know if you've heard of Wild by Cheryl Strayed. It's a very good book, and it's also a really good movie. But the idea of going to the mountain by yourself usually is brought on, for me at least, by a profound change. So, for example, the first time I did that was right after graduating from chiropractic college. I was a little lost that summer. I had lots of free time on my hands, and I'm a person that when I have lots of free time, it gets to me. I get a little fidgety, yeah? And so I decided that I'd be doing a hike for 3-4 days around, if I recall correctly, around 80-90 kilometers.
80.
90. In the end, I don't remember how much I did, but that was around it. And the reason that I always choose these scenarios is because when you have that solitude and you're hiking, you're walking, you can only focus on one step, so one foot behind the other, and you enter into not this trance, but into more of a meditation type experience. So it's not like sitting at home on a couch and meditating, but you do find that solitude, you do find that quiet, and you're enveloped by the more natural environment, which I always find helps you get your thoughts pretty clear.
How did you, I mean, I get that. How do you train for this? Did you prepare? Did you make a plan of you going this ways and you were always checking out the maps, or you just like went and wherever it will take you?
No. So I always plan a little, at least the route that I want to take, because the mountain is also something that you have to be careful with. You can't just go and lose yourself. I mean, even in Spain in the Pyrenees, which are the North Mountains, every year we have people who get lost, who don't find their way back. So
in High Tatras in Slovakia, we have a lot of Czech people who fell off the cliffs.
Yeah. So we don't really have cliffs, but Spain is, I think, the third most mountainous country in Europe, as far as I know. And, it's easy, especially when I went, it was in summer. If you don't plan things accordingly, you don't have access to water, maybe you get lost, you get tired, you don't necessarily have connection, so you can't really call anybody. And when you go by yourself, you do need to plan that out a little. So I did have a Garmin watch, if I recall, and I planned out how many kilometers I wanted to do each day. And there are little huts where you can sleep, but I wanted to do vivac. And vivac is basically when you go with a very thin type of foam or mattress, and you just sleep with your sleeping bag under the stars. It's an amazing experience. Obviously, I also chose days that the weather was good, because if you sleep under the stars and it's going to rain, then not a fun experience.
Okay. What was the weather like? Like temperatures like? You said it was summer.
It's summer, but depending on the region, it can easily go down to between 0 and 5 degrees. So it's not too bad, but you do need a good sleeping bag.
Sleeping gear.
Sleeping gear.
Okay. Yeah. Are you not afraid of animals? Or what is the chance you meeting some? I mean, rabbits are probably fine, but something what would be more dangerous for you?
I think the only animals that I was aware of that could potentially be a problem are zorros. So it's kind of like it's a fox. There we go. It's a fox.
Fox.
I do know that bears have been reintroduced into the Pyrenees, but there aren't too many specimens, and not in the area where I was hiking. I know that wolves have also been reintroduced, but also not in the area where I was hiking. So what I specifically did was not to camp, not to sleep in the forest. I actually went at a higher altitude where it's very barren. So there's only basically rocks, there's a few bushes, but there are no trees. So essentially there's less wildlife. And I found a place next to a wall so that I could have a bit of shelter from the wind.
Mm-hmm. When you said the bears and the wolves were reintroduced, means that they were pushed away in the past and now they're trying to bring them back?
Yes. So bears was a problem in Spain because many years ago they were hunting cattle, sheep, etc. And they were almost hunted down to the point of extinction. And I think the same thing with wolves. The very interesting thing is that bears have been slowly reintroduced, but the wolves have found their way back naturally. So especially these last 2 summers, they have found that there is a specific type of wolf that comes from the Swiss Alps, the Italian mountains as well, that have found their way all the way back to Spain. So that's very interesting. And it's also...
Wolves are great.
They're great. They're great. And there's also a really good video how wolves create rivers. So it's a good YouTube video to watch how important wolves are in an ecosystem. And they essentially form the geography of the land as well.
Can you somehow summarize it?
Yes.
How a wolf is creating a river?
So long story short, when you don't have a high chain predator, you get, for example, more rabbits, you get more herbivores. The more herbivores there are, the less plants and bushes. The less plants and bushes there are, it's easier for rains to create like landslides and erosion. And in the long term, that creates a less diverse ecosystem. So what they did in Yellowstone specifically was to reintroduce the wolf. And by decreasing the amount of herbivores, more plants started to grow. Means more birds, more types of insects, more type of worms, more trees. If there are more trees, when it rains, you don't have as much erosion. And that affects the landscape. So it was very interesting. Wolves equals a more diverse ecosystem.
Cool. I always looked at wolves for, the hierarchy.
Yeah.
What they have. Mm-hmm. And I always found it very, very fascinating. There is definitely this nuance. I don't know if it's actually true, but I like to believe it's true. So as the leader is always at the back.
Yes.
Yeah. The leader is not the one who is leading the way, showing the way.
Correct.
The leader is the one who is making sure that everybody's going to the destination the way they should. So, and it has a lot of different in the hierarchy, there's a lot of different other rules, right? Like when the wolves are traveling, as where the young and strong are, where the moms with babies are, where the older ones who are weaker are, and all of that. It's very interesting to just see how naturally they can create this whole system that works perfectly, even applied to a human society, if applied. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so what was like your biggest benefit? How you benefited the most from this experience? What it gave you? This how many times you did these solo hikes?
This was the main one that I did, but I have gone a few times, just walking by myself for a day or two, and then come back home. Okay, yeah. Benefits. Just a reminder of how far willpower can take you, and that you are very capable of doing things by yourself. You don't always need to be surrounded by people to get to your objectives. And I do think that's something that we need to learn in society as general. So obviously we look to communities, we look for support. But people don't really know how to be alone nowadays in society. And I find that finding your strength when you are alone and isolated is one of the biggest things you can learn, and that can carry you forward in life. Obviously, you're never truly, truly alone, but in the moments when you perhaps feel more isolated, you have moved to a different country, you need to figure things out on your own. If you know how to manage that solitude, things become easier.
Which is a very fresh experience for you.
It's a very fresh experience, definitely.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge in all these? Like, were there points where you thought you won't make it, or you need to strongly change the plan or intention because of certain circumstances?
I think there was one day where I had already walked, I don't know, around 15 kilometers, obviously with terrain, so a positive and negative altitude. And I still needed to do 5 more, around like 20 kilometers to reach my destination. And I was just tired. I couldn't feel my legs anymore. I had blisters and I just didn't really have the motivation anymore. And you really do have to push yourself forward. It's like, okay, there's nobody here that's going to come and help me. I can't call mom and be like, Mom, pick me up. No, right? So
well, you can try.
You can try, but that's not the point, right? The point is to kind of push yourself through things. So that was one experience where, I cried by myself. I was like, okay, I need to get through this. I need to push myself. And I have those moments where you go down the well, and generally I push myself as far down as I can, because when you reach the bottom, there's no other way to go than back up. And the other scary experience was when I drank all the water, and I had looked at a river where I could replenish with some chlorine, because I had chlorine tablets. But
to clean it.
To clean it, correct. And when I got there was no water. So I was screwed.
Okay, so you calculated with that water, and it wasn't there.
Yeah, so since then I have also learned how to really ration water. That was a very scary experience because I was in the middle of nowhere, and literally I hadn't seen anybody in like a day or two. So luckily for me, I followed the trail of what should have been like the little river. And I found a puddle, which is full of like frogs, tadpoles, dirty, nasty brown water. And, I just took that water and put several chlorine tablets, not just one, but extra, just in case. And it worked. I mean, I'm alive, so.
Have you had some problems then? With like digestion or?
No, not at all.
So it didn't create any problem?
No. Obviously, it's disgusting. I mean, you look at the muddy water and you're like, ugh, what am I doing? Why did I put myself in this situation? But, when you're taken to extreme situations, you do anything.
Yeah. Well, this is something like you have these 2 types of discomfort, right? when you said that, like I just realized because, okay, you went for 3 or 4 days, was it?
This one was different. So this hike I was doing in Spain, it's called the GR11, which is you basically cross the Pyrenees from the Mediterranean Ocean the Mediterranean Sea, all the way to the Atlantic. But I didn't finish that hike because in the end, my wisdom teeth were coming out. I got a fever and I had to stop at a certain point. But
yeah.
So
okay, so that's another.
See, my wisdom was coming out.
So you better stop.
Yeah, so I stopped.
Because okay, so let's say you go for a hike for a couple of days, and just going on your own, taking care of your own food and all that, which I want to ask all about. That can be perceived as a certain type of discomfort you're putting yourself into.
Yes.
However, that's mostly at that moment because you are choosing it.
Yes.
That's discomfort from the outside for people who are not doing it or who are not willing to do it. For you, it's still a choice and it's still somehow somewhat comfortable.
Yes.
But the true challenge was another type of discomfort that you didn't want to be in was when you run out of the water or in the, what was the previous setback?
The previous scenario was I still needed to walk several kilometers, which meant several hours.
Yeah, so you are somewhere and you put yourself into that situation, but you didn't intentionally put yourself into a situation that you are already fucked up and you still need to go another couple of hours.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's when you actually realize that, well, until this point, it wasn't even a challenge in that meaning.
Exactly.
Because the challenge only came when you really didn't want to do it and you really didn't calculate it with what is going to most likely be needed to happen because you needed to continue, right?
Exactly.
Whether to find the water or to hike a couple of more hours.
Correct.
What was the wisdom tooth about? Like, so you were crossing that.
So I had already walked around. This was during summer, and I had already walked around 250 kilometers. I think, like over several days. I think it was a week and a half. But then my wisdom tooth was starting to hurt, and I started to get a bit of a fever. So I had to stop the walk and go back home. Yeah.
And that turned out to be like all was okay, yeah?
All was okay. I got my tooth pulled out.
Oh, you got it pulled out?
Yeah, I got it pulled out, but all was okay. Yeah.
What do you eat when you do? Because I guess you're not carrying all the food what you will need with you, or do you?
It depends. So on this long hike, I did have a very heavy backpack. It was almost 15K, which is too much actually. 15. Okay. And I carried, so you have the little gas tanks, you have the little cooker, exactly. And I carried grains. I also carried like the kind of fast food, the yakisoba, the noodles, which are dehydrated. So they don't weigh anything. It's great. It doesn't weigh at all. And
it's like this little spongy thing.
It's the noodles, the dried Chinese noodles. Okay. And they weigh nothing at all. It's like, I don't know, maybe 40 grams or so or less. And then when you cook it, you actually get a decent plate of noodles, of pasta. Yeah. Cool. So as a mountaineer, you always think of the weight. It's super, super important because, even your backpack, even your sleeping bag, you will pay hundreds of euros to try and get the lightest gear as possible. It really makes a difference on how far you can go, the fatigue. And it's one of the things I learned the hard way on this hike. I was carrying way too much weight and it made everything so much more difficult. So that is for a long hike. For small hikes, 2-3 days, the backpack should always be under 10 kilos. And generally the type of food you carry is also more like snack bars, apple, mainly pretty much carbohydrates. So you kind of...
I was just about to ask, what you focusing more? You go more for carbs?
More for carbs. So
wouldn't let's say beef jerky be a good option?
Yeah, I mean, they do have that. You have the dehydrated
Yeah.
beef jerky, things like that. But I have never actually taken that with me.
Because I would go for that all day.
Yeah.
You know, compared to Chinese noodles.
Yeah, Chinese noodles.
Also, the prep time is different, right?
Exactly. No, obviously on 2-3 day hikes, you never carry the gas tank, the cooker at all. You just go with prepared food, even like a sandwich, some snack bars.
Who taught you all this?
Okay. I kind of started to do this with my ex-partner. And then when I saw that my passion for mountain was really a thing, I always believe it's really important to get the proper formation. And so I did a course, an alpinism mountaineering course, because anybody can walk in the mountain with a backpack, but you need to know how to navigate life-threatening situations. So that's what I was interested to know, how to navigate these situations, especially if you do hiking in the winter where there's ice, there's snow. The situations really change there. And I particularly remember I really enjoyed the course because we learned how to rescue someone from an avalanche. And it comes to show that you really have under 5 minutes to save someone. And under 5 minutes, if the person has worn a helmet, then the survival rate is around 80-90%. But as soon as it starts to get to 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes, the life expectancy reduces to around half or less.
Mm-hmm. I suppose you are not doing this course online.
No, absolutely not. Okay. No. We.
So how does this work? Like you actually go there?
Yes. So I went with a specific group, like mountaineering group in Catalonia. And we had a course that lasted, I think it was 3 days up in the Pyrenees in the winter. We actually went right before Christmas. And we had an awesome course instructor. He had been to the Himalayas. He has done some serious climbing. So I really felt like I got the instruction from the best. Mm-hmm. And we did avalanche training. We did training with, ropes, rock climbing with the ice axe, with a spiky shoes. Again, I don't know what they're called in English. And like, even if you slip, sometimes depending the ice, it can be slippery. Either it's like snow where you walk, it's fine, or it can really be ice where you slip and you fall 100 meters. So how to stick in your ice axe to prevent a fall, how to save yourself, things like that.
And you were practicing this?
Yeah, absolutely. And we would practice, obviously not hiding a person under the snow in the terms of an avalanche, but generally when you're out in the mountain, you, especially in winter, you carry this type of device. It's called arva, and it emits a radio frequency. So in the case that there's an avalanche, you can be detected by a rescue team. So when you go with a team, it's a radio frequency between the different devices. And if something happens, then, for example, you can track exactly my position under the ice. But there's a specific way that you have to search, because even if you're off by 0.5 meters, you have to start digging again, and you've lost 5 minutes of your time, because digging the snow and digging a person out is hard.
So anybody with that device can find somebody else with that same device, or the searching device is different?
That's a good question, actually. I don't remember. I think the devices, they can be different brands.
Sure, yeah.
They will still emit that radio frequency, but obviously it's not like it works if you're on a completely different mountain range. It doesn't work. You have to be within certain range.
Let's say there is an avalanche. Or we are there, and I'm under the snow, and I have the device. With your device, what you have with you, you can find me, or you need to wait for the rescue team? Because
I can find you. In fact, you can't really wait for the rescue team. By the time the rescue team has come, the person's probably dead.
Game over.
Yeah, game over. So there's a very specific way that you need to do the tracking to find the person, because usually the person will be covered like by 1 meter 2 of snow. And as I was saying, you have these sticks where you literally poke into the ice so you can feel where the body is. So you have like these foldable sticks and you kind of poke the ice to see if the body is there. And when you have that point pinpointed, then you start digging.
So you mean you just pushing some foldable stick through the ice?
Yeah.
And if you feel there is something softer,
yes,
let's say,
basically,
it's like, okay, that's my
body.
That's my body.
Exactly. And then you start digging, and hopefully you find the person all right. Because generally the problem with an avalanche is contusion. So if somebody's not wearing a helmet, usually there's a trauma, a cranial trauma, and that will wipe someone out. And if that's not the case, then it's asphyxia, because it's very hard to breathe under the snow. Or you swallow it, because, when you see the avalanche coming toward you, it's such a shock. The first thing you do is like, you gasp, you open your mouth, and you swallow it whole.
You swallow the avalanche.
Not purposely, but...
Yeah, but that's I heard that, and I know how much this is applicable, or how many people who were actually buried under avalanche were able to do it. But like, you should wave this.
Yes. So the idea is as if you were swimming, you have to get yourself into position almost as if you were trying to like swim, so that when you're in the sea and a wave comes and you're standing up, you'll get dragged along and then you start doing like pirouettes. Yeah. Whereas if you're more horizontal and you try and kind of swim,
catch the wave,
the wave, then it's better. And the other also really interesting thing I heard, I don't know if it's true, obviously I've never had it happen to me before, but I also learned that if you're in an avalanche and you're alone and you don't know which way is up, you pee yourself. And that way you get an orientation of where up could be, because your orientation, your sense of orientation is really affected. But then again, I'm not an expert. This is what I learned. I've never actually, we had the practice rounds.
It's never a wrong thing to pee yourself. Right? Just to try it out.
Just to save your life, maybe. I would definitely do it to save my life.
Yeah. What I was actually referring to before, I heard that you like do this little, not necessarily swimming, but as it's stopping, you can do the swim. Swim for your life, but you do these little waves in front of your face to create like an air bubble. So you can breathe, even you'll be buried under, but you'll create like a little space for your head to breathe there.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. I didn't understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, hopefully we will never need this.
Correct.
This great survival skill. When you do all this, what's like, your parents okay with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Letting you go for a couple of days hiking on your own?
Yeah, they obviously want feedback, but they know that sometimes there's not good phone reception. But yeah, they're okay with it. My father has done this before. At home, we're pretty independent. So we always say no news is good news.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It works. But yeah, they're pretty much okay with it.
Mm-hmm. Can you assess avalanche risk? Because they can teach that as well, right?
Yes.
There are certain ways to...
Yes. Generally, you can you should know the history of the ice falls a little. Like what the previous days have been like. You can also look at...
I thought like thousands of years ago.
No.
Okay.
But also when you look at the ice with a shovel, you scrape off a piece. You can see the different layers of ice. You can see if it's softer, if it's harder, if it's more like a plaque. So that gives quite a bit of information, but generally...
You mean like a cut through?
Yeah, a cut through the ice.
Like a cake, right?
Like a cake. Mm-hmm, and then you can analyze the different layers. And generally what we do is there's these websites for avalanche risk, and it will tell you it usually goes from, if I recall correctly, from like 1 to 4. And it will tell you the avalanche risk. So obviously if it's like a 3 or a 4, then maybe you don't want to go out that day.
Poke the bear.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so after how many of these kind of hikes, experience going, you said you did it with a partner before, then you did a course. You said a couple of days of the course, they teach you everything. So you have like also some kind of certification for that, or it's just like for a personal development?
No, if I think I got a certificate, but obviously it was only like the first module, beginner module.
Okay.
I think that's what it was called. And you can go into intermediate, advanced. But for me, it was just the point of, knowing everything from the get-go to have a solid base.
Okay. And then you were like, well, I'm good enough.
Let's go. Well, not on my own. So especially the first few times, I created quite a bit of a group there, like some friends, and we would do outings every few weekends or so. We would go to the north, to the Pyrenees, and we would do some hiking. Some alpinism. So that was fun, especially like in winter. I haven't ever gone alone. That's okay. Important. In summer, no problem. In winter, no, the situation is far more risky.
How big would the group be when you were going?
Usually, I don't know, between 5 and 10 people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not that bad. Maybe once I went with another friend, so we were just 2 or 3. But generally, we would organize these groups together to go as a large group.
And when you... What do you prefer? Yeah, when you compare going on your own, going with a group. Of course, everything has its pros and cons and it's individual. But did you find it eventually annoying that there are some other people and they're like slowing you down, or you're not going the way you want it, or it's not calm enough?
Honestly, I don't know what to say if I prefer one thing or another. If I'm at a low moment of my life, then I would choose to go by myself. But I think the group really brings out the best and the worst of you, and you can analyze a person very deeply when they're in the mountain, because it will bring the best and the worst attributes out. Yeah. So when you're in a group, you're not thinking about you. You can't think about you. It's just like the wolves. You have the pack. And generally, the strongest person or the leader will go behind. You will have the noobs right in front, yeah. And you're always monitoring for that feedback, gauging how they feel, if it's too much, if they're okay, if we turn back. Also, as the leader, you need to evaluate the situation, the weather, very closely, because it changes in an instant. So for example, I specifically remember one mountain that we were at 100 meters from the peak, and all of a sudden the weather changed. Like in the space of 15 minutes, we started having winds of 100 kilometers per hour. Yeah, like blizzard.
Wow.
Blizzard. And I remember I had to get my blizzard goggles out. And one of the things that you never do, you never take your glove off, and not in these winds. And I did that, right?
You never take what?
Your glove off.
Oh, glove. Okay.
Because it disappears and your hand freezes. No, I'm not joking. Also, really good to have backup socks, because you can always use backup socks as gloves. So that's another tip there.
I have backup socks even in my sandals.
Okay, good.
I always have a backup socks in my backpack.
Yeah, that's good. So I took my glove off for a moment to look for my blizzard goggles in my backpack. And in that instant, for like 30 seconds where I took my glove off, it took me around half an hour to regain the feeling in my hand, just because of the temperature. So maybe we were at, like minus 15 degrees, but the actual feeling temperature was way below that, minus 20 or so.
Yeah, because of the wind.
Yeah, because of the wind.
And so you didn't lose the glove?
No, I didn't lose the glove.
You just put it down
I just put it down,
second?
but it's especially when there's these high winds, you have to be very careful with removing your gloves, that they don't fly off. Yeah.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. Very, very careful.
Nice.
And then we were just at 100 meters from the peak, so it's the typical thing. Do we go? Do we push? Do we reach the peak, or do we go back down? And this is where your ego always comes into play, and you have to say, well, the mountain's not going to move. It's going to be there tomorrow. We'll just have another go. It depends on the person. Like, for example, there's a very good documentary by, I think his name is Nims Purja, 14 Peaks. And he is the first person who has summited all of the highest 14 peaks in the Himalayas. And he has done it in the span of 7 months. And he has come across lots of situations where, you know, he has a team with him and he thinks, okay, this is not just about me. It's about the whole team. Do we push through? Do we go or do we go back? And you will find many expeditions where they will always go for safety and they will drive back. And in his case, I wouldn't say it has to do with ego in his case, but he was just more positive. He really thought he could push through and do it. And he holds now a Guinness World Record for having completed those 14 peaks in 7 months, I think it was. So it's also another really good documentary
He
to
survived.
watch. Yeah, he survived.
Okay.
He survived.
Okay. When you started, it's like, oh, sometimes you should not push. And then you start to tell the story. I thought he pushed through and...
No.
So he made it.
He made it. Yeah. Not many people thought he would. Like, many people thought he was crazy. But then again, you know,
Yeah, so
his lema was, what was it? Nothing is impossible or something like that. I don't.
Okay. Yeah. So basically he was risking more than some people would.
Yeah.
So he was criticized for that.
Yes.
I was once on a lecture of one Czech guy who I think he has also like top 5, top 10, I don't know how many. Definitely one of the best in Czech Republic and also one of the best in the world in summiting all these places. And he was doing one, I believe it was Kilimanjaro.
Yeah,
I'm not,
Kilimanjaro.
I'm not 100% sure. And it was his 3rd or 4th attempt on that mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was 50 meters from the peak. But he knew they'll take him a lot of time because deep, you know, I know what even the steepness, you know, what the incline was there. And he knew that he might get there, but it's very unlikely he will get there and back. So he turned his back. Even he could see it. And as he said, like, it's not about whether you go up, it's about whether you go home after you went somewhere.
Absolutely.
Right? So, yeah, it's brutal, right? Ego check.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to a point, what you just said now. Yeah, you may feel great when you're starting off and you may be nearly at the peak, but it's always a reminder that the peak is not it. You still have halfway back home, right? And that's something that many of us forget to do, especially at the beginning, because we feel strong, we feel okay, we have, you know, the strength, and we forget that we still have halfway to go. So it's really easy to kind of feel great, and then as soon as you're at the peak, you're like, oh shit, I have to go back down now. I don't know if I have the strength to do this.
Yeah, it's not like when you peak in a gym, you just drive home and you're okay.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you have to really calculate, okay, good, I got up here, now there's the other half down.
I wanted to ask about the dynamic of the group. Okay, when you said, okay, the leader is making sure everybody's fine, everything is going well, he's the one responsible for the weather. Are you electing the leader, or how you know who is the leader? Because if you have a group of 10 people, there might be people who are equally or very similarly experienced. So how do you establish who is the leader? If there is a decision to be made, are you voting for it, or you always listen to this guy?
No.
Or girl,
in my case, it was pretty clear. He's a great guy. His name is Albert, and he has lots of mountain experience. And he was also perhaps the more safety-oriented person. So it was very clear that he was the one in the group who would manage everything. Like, the way to explain this is we don't choose, we don't vote. It's generally the person who has the most experience. And the way I can relate this is, for example, it's a completely different situation, right? But if you're faced with a situation where you have to do CPR, so cardiopulmonary resuscitation, generally the person who has the most character and persona will be the one who leads, right? So if somebody drops on the floor and you have to do the resuscitation, obviously you're going to get a bit of a crowd and people will tell you, no, you have to do this, you have to do that, you're doing it wrong, you're pushing too hard, you're pushing too soft. So really it's the character, the persona that comes out, that strength, the leading, that's what defines who's in charge. Yeah. I don't know if I explained that very well.
Okay. Oh, I understand that it comes out of maybe natural authority of the person.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. The natural authority. Thank you.
Yeah. That's fine. However, that can be even in way less risky environment, whether it's job or sport team or, that can be questioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there might be people who will be like, no, that's bullshit. I experienced this and that, and I don't agree with this decision, and let's do it my way. Like did this happen to some of your hikes or?
Not in this case. It did happen in the United States where I was in a group where we were out to like visit a canyon, a natural park. And we were just like a group of normal people. We had gone to the US for a seminar. We weren't like specifically hikers, like I was a hiker and there were a few more. And there were a few people who really wanted to push and go all the way to the peak. And at the beginning, I went with them, but then I saw that the group kind of started to break off. And the ones at the front, they really wanted to push. They weren't really taking into consideration the other people that were perhaps struggling. And I was like, okay, you guys, you can go on. We'll be in touch, but I'm leading the rest of the group back because we're losing them and I don't feel comfortable with the situation. So sometimes you do have these dynamics where you don't completely agree and you have to stop, talk, see what your course of action will be and then stick to it.
Sometimes it's very hard to step up, right? Many people might, just because they don't want to admit that they are tired or whatever the situation is, that they would rather be quiet and suffering, even though it will not lead to mostly beneficial outcome for everybody, right? It's like the saying that the problem on the world are not evil people. It's the good people who shut up when they see evil happening.
Exactly.
So like standing up for yourself is very important, definitely in this, right? Because you have it in of course, every action movie has it, right? The main hero is injured.
Yeah.
But I'll push through, whatever. I mean, sometimes it's not the best to push through, right?
And I've learned that the hard way. I think we'll get to that topic in a minute, but generally, I do consider myself to have a bit of an ego, and I like to show myself and others that I'm capable of doing things that I can really push through, but sometimes, at what expense? So it's something that I'm slowly learning, how to say no, how to be like, okay, this is as far as we go, and we stop. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. This is just me, and I have to feel how far I can go. But it's hard. It's hard to stand up for yourself. Many people, for example, have trouble saying no, whether it's in the work environment, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a personal environment. And it takes courage because we generally want to be accepted in a group. We want to feel liked. Everybody wants to feel liked and loved. And when you feel like you're going against someone or saying no, that maybe being liked kind of depends on that. Yeah. That's why most of us, will generally go for...
And in hiking, 100%, it's like a perfect analogy because evolutionary, we are... The biggest fear for people is that they'll be ostracized from the group.
Exactly.
And in hiking, that's literally it.
Yeah.
Like, you're afraid to say, I don't want to go any further because they will leave you there.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably won't.
No.
But that's kind of like, you don't want to be the one slowing the group. You don't want to be the one breaking the group or, even though it might be 10 people hiking and 6 want to say it and nobody says it.
Yeah.
Because they think that they are the only ones.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So
what happened? You said you learned the ego check the hard way.
It's not one specific situation. Okay. But for example, I did. I was pushed into a bit of into a challenge by a friend where it was a BTT race, and I had never really been into cycling and stuff. He's like, "Oh, I'm sure you."
What is BTT?
BTT is like biking, but off road.
Okay.
So mountain
Like
biking.
biking trail.
Yeah, biking
stuff.
trail, exactly. And so it was a 60-kilometer race. And
60.
yeah, 60.
Oh my God.
I know. And he's like, oh, why don't you do it? Why don't you do it? I was like, oh, because I don't like it. I don't feel up to it. I don't want to do it. He's like, oh, I'm sure that you can't do it, that you can't finish it. And that just, it pissed me off. I was like, oh, I'll show you I can do it. And so I signed up.
I would have like exact opposite reaction probably.
Yeah?
In that
Okay,
world. Yeah,
no.
I'd be like, yeah, fuck, no. It's not about if I can. It's about I don't want to.
Yeah.
You know?
No, so this was me several years back when I was still pretty young. I was like, yeah, I can do it, and I'll show you I can do it. And so I did it, and it was actually a BTT race where you had to orient yourself, like you had to use the maps and stuff. And in the end, it was also teamwork. So I kind of dragged my mother into this. Yeah, because it was in groups, and I think we were like one of the only female groups. I think maybe there were 2 or 3. And in the end, what ended up happening is this guy, his group, they got lost, and we ended up finishing the race at a better time and actually qualifying for podium instead of him.
Really?
Yeah. So
Okay, so was it worth it?
it definitely felt good. It definitely felt good. But yeah, what I meant about the ego check is, I've slowly learned to teach myself that if I do things, it's for me. It's not because I have to prove anything to others.
But I find it very different and unique when people can say it this way, that they are aware that they have an ego problem. Because the people who really have an ego problem, they are not aware of it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be like, no, I'm not easily challenged, No,
Yeah.
I don't do stuff like that, But anytime there is a situation, they do exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So that's already like, I believe this was some kind of rule in past that a person, anecdotally, not literally, a person who will say that they are crazy, they're actually not crazy.
yeah.
So if a person will say that I have an ego problem, just the fact that you are aware of it, it's already changing the whole situation, because you are aware that if certain situation presents itself,
I hope
you might
so.
react certain way, so you already can, maybe you're not willing to, but you can regulate it.
Yeah. I mean, it's mainly the feeling recognized, or that I'm worth it, that I have the capabilities. That's where perhaps my ego kind of lies. I like to be recognized or valued. Don't we all, right? But I guess there are certain levels to it, as with everything.
It depends in what.
Yeah,
right?
It depends on what. But yeah, it's definitely, there's been some personal development in that aspect, and it's an everlasting journey.
Okay, but it's getting better for you, yeah?
I think it's getting
less dangerous.
I think it's getting better. But then, for example, I got a book a few days ago by a friend, and it says something like, the more you try to prove that you are special, the further and further away you stray from yourself. And that really hit a spot. I was like, okay, that's true. Like, why do I need to prove constantly that I'm special or that I'm worth it? As long as I know it, what do I care if others see it or if they don't see it? If they don't see it, then too bad, really, I should be the one to recognize myself, not to get recognition from others. And so that, I'd really like that quote, because it's not about being special, it's about finding yourself. And when you find yourself and what your passions are, what you really want to do, then you already are special. You contribute your little grain of sand to the world.
But it might be that it would be way easier if people judge themselves as much as they judge others. Not in a meaning of being judgmental.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Looking at it that way,
within.
because people are very unaware of who they are. Many times. I learned this very hard way as well. where I remember the situation. It was like a bunch of people I didn't really know. I mean, they were classmates of my that time girlfriend, and we were spending night in one cabin, and we were raided by bunch of guys, you know, and anyway, they just came, broke some stuff, broke some equipment, broke some noses, and left. And I thought, if you would ask me that morning, I would say I will react a certain way, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And it was a very tough check for me to realize that, oh shit, like, I don't know even myself, you know? It's like when somebody was like, no, you will do this, I know you. I was like, hey, I don't know myself. Don't tell me you know me, because until you are in that situation, you don't know. Of course, I learned from it, and now I think it's very different, and the whole situation repeated would go very differently now. But at that moment, it was super, super big gap between what I thought reality is and what the reality actually was.
Yeah, who you thought you were and who you really wanted to be, basically.
Exactly.
I had a bit of that experience. For example, if we go back to rock climbing, we were doing multi-pitch climbing, which is basically you climb the whole mountain. You can't go back down usually. Yeah, so you have different goes at it, like one partner after the other, and you keep on climbing all the way up. And we got stuck at a certain point, so we were doing a rappel. I don't know what that's called. It's basically, you know, like Tom Cruise when he does Mission Impossible and he goes down the Burj Khalifa like with a rope, kind of like that, but in the mountain.
I have an amazing story about this, but
we'll get back to it in a minute.
Yeah.
But basically, we got stuck because sometimes when you try and do a rappel, the rope sometimes gets stuck. And it was already late because we had made a few mistakes. We had chosen the wrong route because there were several climbing routes in the same wall. And the rope had gotten stuck. It was already late. It was starting to get dark. And the image I had of myself of being a calm person, analyzing the situation and dealing with it, as you said, I didn't freak out completely, but I was definitely more shaken, more nervous, and to the point of tears than I would have liked. And that was also a big reality check in the terms of, okay, I wouldn't say a life-threatening situation, but definitely a scary situation where we could have been sleeping on the wall the whole night. And I didn't perhaps react or navigate the situation as I would have wanted. But the good thing is when you choose a good partner, if one is down, the other can compensate. And in that moment, for example, my current partner, who's also my rock climbing partner, he navigated the situation very well. He was very calm. He saw that I had a bit of anxiety, and he knew, using breath as well, how to calm us both down to, again, reevaluate the situation to see what we could do, what we couldn't do, and whether it was time to call the firefighters, but the mountain rescue team. Yeah, we didn't in the end. We were lucky, but it was one of those situations where you think, okay, maybe I wasn't at my best.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we were talking before, you need to somehow get to a point where you, especially when you do this kind of things, where you, of course, you're not going to fully reach that. It's infinite, but you want to know yourself.
Yeah.
You want to know what the reaction would be and so on. And I believe that comes from being exposed to extremes.
Yes.
Like ice bath.
Absolutely.
Or or so many. Hey, I've seen it in past couple of weeks. I've seen so many times people who were the most scared got it very well.
Yeah.
And people were like, nah, you know, please, you know. Then they jumped out after a couple of seconds, or it's like, it's so cold. Yeah, it's fucking ice bath. It's cold.
That's why it's really curious how extreme situations, it brings out the real character. And that's why I was saying, if you really want to know someone, take them to the mountain and take them for several hours. Yeah. You will see what comes out.
Yeah. Or for that sake, any type of discomfort.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
You can have, I remember this was, I mean, we managed fairly well, but this was a terrible situation, at least at that moment in our eyes. I was traveling with my brother, Tima was there, and my brother's girlfriend, that time girlfriend, and we were going from through Germany, from Denmark back to Czech Republic, where we were all studying at the moment, and we got a flat tire, but not like flat. It exploded. You know, like as we were going, we were like easily 140, 120, and it just like a very big bang. I felt it under my ass because it was the tire on my side. You know how everything changed. Like, what the fuck?
That's scary.
Yeah, we were so lucky. It was the back one, because on the front one it would be way more dangerous. And basically, we were 1 day late, like full 24 hours late.
Yeah.
Because our car didn't have a spare tire. It had the set so you can fix it. But I mean, you can't fix that because it was like completely torn. It was like chopped into 100 pieces, you know? So and it was getting dark. We just stopped. I was like, what the fuck? okay. Put the vest on. I called the emergency from this. We actually stopped right next to the telephone.
Okay, that was lucky.
Yeah, that was super lucky. And then we needed a navigation through, because neither of us, even girls that time, even Tima, she was studying a school in German language. Okay, that didn't work. She wasn't confident enough to do that. So we had a friend on one phone on the speaker, and the guy who we were communicating with in German on the other speaker, and we just made them talk. And there was so much shit that needed to be fixed and happen, because we were in the middle of nothing. The nearest city was like 50k or something. So we went in that truck that dragged the car into some service, but the service was only opening in the morning. Yeah. So we needed to find a hotel. So he found us like some one last room in a whole city hotel or something. So multiple were closed already. Like we were full. And I mean, so much shit was just happening, and you just realize you were so much out of control of the circumstances.
Of the situation.
And just next step, okay, let's solve this one. Next step, let's solve this one. I missed 2 exams on the Monday I was supposed to take at the school, and it was just like all super crazy. But then there, you will really see who is made of what, you know, in that situation.
Absolutely. So, it's how you navigate those unexpected scenarios.
Yeah. Especially when you might have even somebody needs to be calmed because they are not dealing with it well. That's exactly what you were saying. You were losing it a little bit, but you had a partner to help you go through it and calm you down there. Yeah. That's cool.
Thank you.
Very cool. So you never had any serious problems, serious injury, like I know, frozen toes or lost toes?
So I wouldn't consider it serious, but I did have a bit of a scare when I got back from. Sorry, it wasn't a hike. It was actually when we went rock climbing. So the rock climbing shoes are very small and they're very tight, and we went rock climbing in winter. And I lost the sensation in my little toe. But obviously you don't really realize until you take the shoe off. That's how it happens, right?
Yeah, you don't really feel
it. I mean, it was cold. I wasn't feeling my hands. I wasn't feeling my feet. But the problem is with the tight shoes, the circulation gets a little cut off. And my little pinky toe had turned a little blue. So that was scary because obviously, you know, I had seen many films. I had heard from people who had eventually lost a few toes, things like that. So I spent a good half hour, an hour just trying to warm up my toe, moving it all over the place, just getting some circulation back. And it didn't get back to its normal color. For several days, it was whitish. And that was scary. So that I think that's the only situation where it was like, wow, okay, winter in the mountains. But then I did have an experience. I wouldn't say it's bad because it's made me grow as a person. But my ex-partner, he had a rock climbing accident where a rock fell on his head and he lost consciousness and he was in coma for a month. So I wasn't there in that situation, but obviously a helicopter came. They took him to one hospital. They couldn't operate him there, so they had to take him to a second hospital. And the only thing I can remember from that month was how the time flied. Like, I only have flashback memories because you are so in the moment. I don't know, all the primal basic instincts or emotions come out and you just go by every minute. Yeah, the news, whether he's gonna be alive or not while they're operating, visiting him every day at the hospital. As soon as the machines start beeping, you're like, okay, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. That was very hard, and it has left, in his case, it has left a bit of sequelas. So permanent damage, specifically right upper extremity. So everything that has to do with fine movement, fine touch. And, in these moments, you always think, okay, like, why me? Why does this happen to me? Like, obviously it didn't happen to me, but I was his partner back then. So it definitely had an effect on us, on our relationship. And we both grew out of this situation. I mean, for me, it was definitely a learning experience. And then for him, I'm happy to say that now he's a Paralympic athlete. So these devastating situations, if you know how to navigate them, and if you trust that things will kind of work out for you, and you keep giving your best, you never know where these things will take you, right? So I really am happy for him.
And he is, when you say he's a Paralympic athlete, is he, what kind of disability he has now?
So he has 33% disability with his right upper extremity. So he's a rock climbing athlete, Paralympic athlete right now. I think he's training with a Spanish team.
He's still doing rock climbing?
He's still doing rock climbing.
Oh shit, that's some tough motherfucker.
Yeah, so it's interesting because for both of us, like after this happened, obviously he couldn't rock climb. He had to learn how to walk again, how to speak again. There were some side effects with dyslexia. And in my case, I wouldn't say fear, but obviously I was very put off by rock climbing. And it wasn't until several years later that I got back into it. So again, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. It applies.
So he has no cognitive damage or anything like that?
No. Just
okay.
What I was saying with speaking, a bit more dyslexia. He already used to have a little, but now it's more pronounced.
All right.
Yeah.
But he's doing well. Fairly well.
Yeah. I mean, we stay in touch every once in a while, and I think he's happy. He's actually become a mountain guide. So what? Yeah, he's actually become a mountain guide.
And his legs are fine. He can walk and everything.
His legs are fine because it hit. So where he had the injury was his left parietal bone. So literally, it crushed his skull. His skull, it cracked into several pieces on the left side, which affects the right part of the body. Yeah. And I remember specifically, they had to create a prosthetic piece for the hole that it left. So there were a few months where literally there was no skull. There was a hole right next to, in his brain.
So they were filling the gap in his skull.
Yeah. So we had to wait a few months for him to get that prosthetic piece. And, it was actually not nice, but there was a part of his head where it was just skin. And if you touched it, it was directly the brain. Yeah.
Did you touch it?
Yeah.
Out of curiosity?
Out of curiosity, but not, obviously not poke,
Yeah.
But it really is freaky. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people don't realize many times how super, super soft brain is.
Yeah. And the brain itself doesn't have any pain receptors. So
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you go and touch the brain, nothing... he doesn't feel any pain. It's more the
It's not
structures.
ticklish, yeah?
No, it's more like the skin, which will give that sensation, but not the brain itself.
Wow. Well,
as far as I know,
never
that's
heard
what
of-
they told me. So
never talked with anybody who touched the brain.
yeah, well, not más o menos.
Okay, how did you, in all of this experience, and why did you decide to do chiropractic?
Okay, so chiropractic, it's also a bit of a long story. In chiropractic, we say you don't choose chiropractic chooses you. And I do think that's true because I was in my last year of high school and I've always really liked sports. I liked physiotherapy, and that was the path that I wanted to take. I wanted to find a combination of the two, but I wasn't 100% convinced, And there happened to be a day at high school where parents come and talk about their jobs, and there happened to be this lady who was a chiropractor. And I was like, okay, what is this? I mean, I've never heard about chiropractic. I was like, it sounds like some voodoo shit.
Well,
well, okay, depends, And so I sat in, and on that, it was 1 hour, and I was hooked, just the concept. So for those of you who don't know, chiropractic, it deals with the spine and the nervous system, and basically they have an intricate connection because the spine protects the nervous system. So if you have any vertebrae, any joints that aren't functioning properly, it will affect nervous system function. So most people only know about chiropractic when they have neck pain or back pain, but there is so much more to it because essentially you are dealing with the health of the nervous system. So like in my practice, back when I was in Spain, I would see all types of people, like babies that were 6 days old to grannies that are 80 or 90 years old. Why? Because it's not about cracking the joint and getting that release or feeling better and, getting rid of the pain. For me, it's really about nervous system function. And as I said, there is that connection between the spine and the nervous system, and nobody really takes care of it, right? So I found it really interesting that you could affect nervous system function, general body well-being without having to undergo surgery or take medications. It's just natural healing, what the body can do.
so you're saying that the cracking is not the goal of chiropractic?
No, absolutely not.
That's a very new idea. Huh?
It's okay. So
for people who don't know much about it, so basically the cracking is just a tool you use.
Yes.
To make a change so the nervous system can function more properly.
Yes. So basically, the reason people fall in love with the cracking is because of the noise, because of the release. It does release endorphins, which is why you feel better. But you can adjust the spine with softer techniques without necessarily getting an audible release. Yeah, that's why chiropractic, whenever...
Can you repeat it one more time?
Yes.
You cannot...
Sorry?
What you just said? Can you?
That you can adjust the spine without having to get an audible release.
So you can?
You can.
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
You can.
All right.
Sorry.
I just want to make it clear. For myself.
Yeah. So why am I saying this? Because everybody, as I said, associates an adjustment that works with a cracking, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, some people are very sensitive to adjustments, and with them you cannot do any cracking. So there are other techniques, lighter techniques, for example, the activator with SOT. This gets more specific, so I'm not going to go in there. But essentially, it's about giving the neural stimulation to the joints so that they're in their proper position, so that there's no pressure on the nerve. So some people will not agree with this. It's called, what's it called? It's like the theory of putting pressure on the hose or something. And the point is, back then they used to say, if a joint is misaligned, there's pressure on the nerve. And if there's pressure on the nerve, the brain and the rest of the body doesn't communicate properly. I mean, if you look at it scientifically, it's not 100% correct, but it is true that if a joint is not aligned, the neurologic feedback between the brain and that part of the body is not 100% okay. Yeah.
Gamma loop?
You're getting a little too specific here.
Okay.
I
No,
would
but
have
is
to.
it- but
I
is
have to
it-
revise.
Is it gamma loop or?
I mean, you're
Because that's essentially that's muscle and tendon signal that is going through.
Exactly. So also, depending on how you adjust, you're stimulating different mechanoreceptors. So for those of you who don't know, mechanoreceptors it's the way that the brain gets information as to the position of the body.
Because this very interesting and super important point that it doesn't only work brain to the muscle or a tendon, it works the other way as well. And that's how brain can know what is supposed to be adjusted and so on.
Exactly.
Because it's getting feedback of how long is the muscle, what is the tension, what is the pressure, and so on. Yeah.
So it is true that, for example, if you do a manual adjustment, so with a cracking, you get more neural firing. Mm-hmm. Right, so you get you get a quicker impulse to the brain. It's more profound effect than, for example, with a soft adjustment. But as I said, you can still get that feedback to the brain and get the joint realigned without the actual cracking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So no cracking needed, but
it's I personally love it. Like, I love manual adjustments. And the other thing that I really like to explain to people is that it's not just about the feeling better, getting rid of the pain, but essentially what we do as chiropractors, we don't do it on purpose, or we don't have a magic button for it, but we're balancing the autonomic nervous system. So again, for those of you who don't know, the autonomic nervous system is everything that we don't really control. So for example, breathing, heart rate, digestion, and there's two parts, right? So when you're stressed, you go into fight or flight mode, into protection, survival mode. So for example, you get more blood to the muscles, your digestion stops, you get into stress mode, right?
Yeah, when you're stressed, you don't digest correctly because that's you're supposed to act.
You're supposed to act.
Not sit and
Exactly.
digest. Yeah.
You're supposed to fight or, run for your life. And then we have the parasympathetic system, which is what I call the rest and digest system. And the problem nowadays is that we live in a society where those two systems are very unbalanced because, we're always on the phone. We're always rushing to get everywhere. We're not sleeping properly. We're not eating properly.
You're not breathing properly.
We're not breathing properly. So essentially, most of us are living in a chronic sympathetic state, which means in a chronic fight or flight mode. And one of the powers of chiropractic is that when we adjust the spine, because each part of the spine has a different effect on the autonomic nervous system, we can stimulate for the parasympathetic and sympathetic to fall back into balance. So if I'm speaking Chinese, what that means is
that the cracking will balance you.
Basically.
On the neural level.
On the neural level, it does. And it's why it's very common as a side effect for patients to feel a little tired after the adjustment, or even what many say to me is, I feel like I'm floating in the clouds. Some feel like they have more energy. Others, they sleep better, or even they come to me after several visits and they're like, hey, my digestion has improved, or, I haven't gone to the bathroom in 3 days. And now after the adjustment, I went to
myself.
Exactly. So it's one of the wonderful things about chiropractic that we don't have magic button for this or that. It's not, okay, I'm going to fix your back pain. I'm going to, fix your neck pain. What we do is we deliver an impulse to the body, and the body does have an innate power to heal itself. Yeah, the body knows what to do with this information, and if it wants to prioritize sleep, then it's going to shut down your system, so you crash and so you're going to sleep. Or if it's going to prioritize taking the pain away, it's going to take the pain away. And that's why we never really fully understand the extent of how a person will react. It's case by case scenario.
So you can say that the reaction will be exactly what you need it to be.
Yes.
Well, then it's ultimate help anyway, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to know eventually, you don't need to 100% be positive on what the effect will be. If you know it's going to be exactly what the person needs.
Exactly. So, when I talk to my patients, I always tell them after the first visit, be aware that you could be feeling this whole range of things, to not freak out. It's normal. If you're tired, or even if you feel a little sore, or you feel like you need 13 hours of sleep, that's what your body is asking you. Go with it, absolutely. I mean, if there's pain that lasts more than 24 hours, then I tell them to check in, and that will see them again. I've never really had that reaction before. But I do believe that the body knows what it needs to do.
Yeah, I think many times I heard this actually as a side story, an analogy. There was one very, very famous, one of the best Slovakian cyclist, Peter Sagan. Peter Sagan. He was on a Tour de France. He won the green dress for the point system, whatever they have, couple of years in a row. And when I was talking with one guy who was involved in his coaching, and when this guy was 15-year-old, he went for a medical check, but like that, until the failure, bike erg and stuff, like full deep on, not just like how tall you are. And, you don't have to put your shoes off anyway. And the doctor literally told him at that moment that you might be a great star if nobody is going to mess you up. So this is, I think about it a lot, that body knows what we need. We just shouldn't be in its way.
Exactly.
Yeah, like we shouldn't really, because if you feel like you should sleep, I had the talk with Oliver about this. Like, if you feel tired, it's because you need the sleep. Right? If you're not digesting properly, it's probably because you really could improve on your diet.
Absolutely.
So we know what we're supposed to do. It's just many times because job is the priority, family is the priority, and we always put ourselves, or I don't do that, but many people put themselves on a very far back place in the list of priorities. And then I can't, and I suffer, and this
well, the body crashes. It comes to a point where it can't adapt anymore.
Eventually it will. It's just, body is a bitch. Like, it can sustain so much, right?
But then it comes to a point, and that's one of the things that also, I mean, I would say it does frustrate me a little bit. So people expect a miraculous change within 1 or 2 visits, and that's not how it works. If it's taking you years to get into a state of degeneration where you're not functioning properly, in essence, then it's also going to take a bit of time for you to get back out of that pattern. I mean, life is patience. It's hard. I'm an impatient person, but the body needs some time to recover. You need to give it some tools. And that's the thing with chiropractic. When I treat a patient, it's not me who's doing the magic. It's their body who's doing the magic. The only thing I have done is give a little impulse, give a little bit of information of what the body needs to kind of restore its balance. And that's one of the cool things. I really appreciate patients who understand lifelong care. They understand the value of getting adjusted every so often, just to keep the body in check. It's like you keep your car in check. You take the car for yearly revisions. Why are you not doing the same with your body? Every once in a while, you need to analyze. You need to see what is it that you're doing.
One day you will sell the car or scrape the car. Can't do that with the body.
No,
right?
exactly. You can't do it with your body. And there's a really good phrase. I saw this in a chiropractic office, and your spine on average needs to last you 88 years. I mean, think about it. It needs to last you 88 years. If you're sitting in an office from 9 to 5 every day, you're not moving, you're eating junk food, you're not sleeping, the life expectancy of your spine is reduced to half. Not half, but what I mean to say is you're going to get levels of degeneration and malfunction when you're 40, 50, which is what we're seeing now. Everybody comes in with pain at around 40 and 50. Why? Because they haven't been taking care of themselves, and they haven't been taking care of the structure that basically supports their life. Again, we're going back to the spine and nervous system. They have an intricate connection. I think of it as a tree. You have the trunk, which is, the brain, the skull, the spine, and the pelvis. And then you have the branches, which are the extremities. A plant, when it takes in water, through the trunk, and then it gives it through the branches all the way to the leaves. So I view the body in the same form. You have the most central piece, you have the trunk, which is the spine, the nervous system. We need to take care of that. And when you apply bits of information, if you help the trunk, usually the body will know how to deal with that, and it will deliver water to the rest of the body. So extremities, and help pains that we may have in knees, shoulders, etc. Doesn't mean I'm not going to look at it, but I always focus first on the spine.
Well, you go to the root of the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We go to the root of the problem.
What is too much? How often do you think people could come? Because I heard from Tima about one guy. Now she had a patient, or somebody in the clinic had a patient who he was doing chiro every day for like a very long time, and now he's somehow messed up. I don't know if it was smart to do it, but I don't know if it was even done correctly, or what was going on. But I can imagine that definitely being cracked every day is probably not ideal, right?
No, I also don't think it would be the best. I mean, again, it depends on the type of problem you have. Let's say you have an acute disc herniation and you're coming in for pain relief, and maybe coming 2 times a week, it's okay, right? But generally, if a patient comes in and they have a problem that is like moderate, I will advise them to come like once a week. And then when there's no more symptomatology, they're feeling better, the range of motion has improved, usually what we chiropractors recommend generally is once a month or max every 6 weeks, just for maintenance and prevention. Now, why do we say that? It's not a number that falls out of the sky, but if you look at the evidence-based literature, if a joint has not been functioning properly or it's immobilized, after 4 weeks, it starts to degenerate. So that's why we say we give the time span of a month, because we can detect that problem and we can correct it before it gets further. Yeah, before the body starts degenerating and going into a negative feedback loop. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I was talking about the 6-week rule with Ahmed. When, I hope I said the name right, because it's always Ahmed.
Yeah.
Because it's the time, he said, when he's looking at his patients and thinking about, postural behavior, that's a time that it takes for body to, for example, heal a broken bone, heal a pulled, maybe torn muscle, like that's roughly, of course, it's not exactly 6 weeks, but roughly 6 weeks. And it's also time when any maybe pathological pattern, any pattern, but also, of course, pathological pattern will be expressed.
Yeah.
So when you do, and that's what he is doing with his patients, when they come with this and this problem, he's like, what did you change 6 weeks ago? And usually they change some training, or they change the way they transport to work or something, like that 6 weeks is a very interesting time period to live by. Like look at like, okay. And this also applies to a diet. Like if somebody will tell me that his diet doesn't work after 2 weeks, like,
no,
come on.
Come on, give it more time.
First of all, let's have a look at what the diet is. Okay. But 2 weeks is not enough to create any permanent change, or not even trigger a permanent, not even start that change process.
Correct.
So yeah, like 6 weeks would be a very good timeline to look at when you're dealing with certain, more induced changes that you are looking for.
Correct. And I mean, it's one of the struggles we have, because it is true that as in any industry, there are many predators and there are many chiropractors who, will get you to come in once every week for the rest of your life just to make the big bucks. So obviously, I don't agree with that. I don't form part of that predator club, but I do think that
it's a Facebook group, yeah.
No,
they have.
You can join if you're interested. But definitely, like the 4 to 6 weeks, it has physiological reasons to it. Yeah, it's not just a number that falls out of the sky. And I have found that patients who kind of stick to that, they just do really well in life in general. Obviously, because they understand the concept of maintenance and prevention, so they apply it to all areas of life. And then just the way their spine moves, the range of motion, the flexibility, their body holds so much longer than a person who's not doing that at all.
I want to ask you one thing that I asked you before, and you scolded me for it. But I want you to explain it in as detail as possible.
Okay.
Why is it not good to crack my neck myself?
Okay. So long story short, it's a little hard to explain without a drawing. But imagine you have 3 articulations, okay? And one of them...
What is articulation?
Articulation is a joint.
Okay.
Yeah. So imagine you have, or like 3 vertebrae, right? The vertebrae are parts of the spine. So imagine you have 3, one on top of the other, like a tower, and the middle one isn't moving properly. So when you crack yourself, it feels good because you're releasing endorphins. But the problem is that feeling goodness only lasts for like 5-10 minutes, and then you feel like you have to crack yourself again. So the problem with self-cracking is that you're increasing hypermobility of the joints above and below.
So if the problem is the joint number, let's keep
2.
it simple, 2.
Yeah.
Out of 3 on top of each other.
Yeah.
The middle one is the problem.
Yeah.
By me cracking my neck, back, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I only increase hypermobility of the 1 and 3.
Correct. So you're increasing hypermobility of other joints because they will be compensating for the joint that's not moving. So vertebra 1 and 3 will be induced to have more movement to compensate for the lack of movement for vertebra number 2. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's also not good because then you have one hypomobile joint, which means it's not moving properly, which is vertebra number 2. And then you have hypermobile vertebra, which are compensating. And that can also lead to laxity, ligamentous damage. You're just pushing tissues further than their threshold.
Okay, so and now what you do, or what chiropractors do,
Yes.
what is different? How come that when you crack it, what you do differently, that when you mobilize it, you attack the joint number 2, the vertebra number 2?
Well, essentially that's what we've gotten training for, but wait.
No shit.
Yeah, but what we do is
it's only 6 years of studies.
Yeah,
so.
it's only 6 years of studies, 5 to 6. Yeah. So what we do is we specifically find the joint that's not moving properly, where the range of motion is reduced, and we specifically crack or gap that joint, to restore its proper range of motion, so that the other vertebrae don't have to compensate.
And how come I can't crack the right one?
I mean,
you somehow you create the space there, and then you crack, right?
I mean, we've studied the joints, right? And every joint has its particular range of motion, like the movement. So you will take it to its end position to then thrust. And when we thrust, it means to put a force to then gap that specific joint. And it's a very specific movement. So we induce specific lateral flexion and rotation with either flexion or extension. I mean, this is getting very specific. But the point is, when you do it yourself, you're doing non-specific movements. And usually what you're going to get is cavitation or a cracking of those hypermobile joints. If one's not moving properly, you're probably not going to get more movement in that specific joint. Yeah, you're going to get the cracking of the other ones that are compensating. So that's, again, the power of chiropractic is we know how to palpate, we know how to find those articulations that aren't moving properly and to restore their biomechanical function.
Yeah, because you're not doing it randomly, just for the sake of pop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you will find that's another thing that it's a little sad to see, at least in my industry. There are many chiropractors who will, just crack everything. They pop all the way up and down, not specific. And as with everything, when you lose specificity, what's the point? What's the point if you're cracking everything? No, chiropractic is specific. Either it is specific or it is nothing. And that's another chiropractic quote.
I see you're big on quotes as I am.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to ask about the endorphins.
Mm-hmm.
my understanding of endorphins, and this would also make sense. I just want to, because you mentioned it a couple of times that each pop, it's a release of endorphins.
Yeah.
As far as I know, endorphins are not really like I want to feel good chemical. Endorphins are released when we want to mask the pain. That's why people have it through the training, because endorphin is released so you keep going and it doesn't feel that bad because you get the endorphins.
Okay, that's
it's
actually...
like to mask the pain there, which
Yeah.
also makes sense for me in the cracking.
That's actually really interesting. To be honest, I don't know that much about endorphins. I just know that they're released. Like when there's gapping of the joints, the release, the cracking that you hear is not the bones that rub against each other. Because many people think they're like, oh, you're going to crack my bones. They say it that way. It's like, no, we're not rubbing or creating destruction of the bones. Like the articular surfaces, we're not grinding anything. What we're doing is we're separating two articular surfaces. So like we're creating space. And in that moment, there's actually a creation of bubbles, nitrogen bubbles, which creates that noise.
So you actually do opposite what people think, because you're not putting the bony structures together, but you're putting them away from each other.
Yeah. So it's a very quick...
they can go back in.
It's a very quick distraction, between two articular surfaces. So it creates a gapping and then they come back together and there's that restored range of motion. Nice. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's as easy as I can explain it. And then the other thing...
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to explain... No, I think that was it.
Okay. You might...
I might remember,
Yeah, you might remember later. Okay, cracking fingers, because that's a huge thing.
So,
for many people, and there's so many studies. Even if you go on PubMed, you can basically find anything you like. You find so many studies saying it's bad, and you also find so many studies saying it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So again, obviously this kind of piqued my interest a year. I think it was a year back that I actually looked into it, because many patients asked me, so can I crack my fingers? And at the beginning, I always told them like, no, it's not good. But then, rather than speaking out of ignorance, I thought, okay, let's actually look into this. And so I found some studies, and it is true that it doesn't actually degenerate the joints. It's not bad, but I think it depends on how you crack your fingers. Like if you're pushing the knuckles, your fingers into your knuckles, then you are kind of creating that compression and grinding.
Okay, like closing the fist.
Like closing the fist, whereas if you're pulling the fingers, then you're creating a distraction. And I think those two mechanisms are very different. Again, this is just my theory. It would be very interesting to test it out. But as far as the literature goes, no, it's not bad to crack your fingers. And
I do it with a rotation. I like grab my finger and I go into...
Okay, I honestly, like I don't know.
Let's say if I go harder, I'll break my finger.
Yeah,
I'll break the joint. So I do it softly, but I do it a lot.
Honestly, I don't know. I don't like it. I advise patients not to do it just because I don't think it's necessary. As I said, I think you do it because of endorphin release. And then after 20 minutes go by, you feel like you have to do it again.
Maybe. I've never thought about that. But I'm doing it to feel better.
But that's why, like, most people would start self-cracking, then they get addicted to it. Like, the first one was my brother, and I would slap him. I was like, dude, you have a chiropractor. I mean, come to me. And the problem is with self-cracking is you get addicted to it. You do it, and then after 15, 20 minutes, you feel like you need to do it again. So it's a negative habit, in my opinion.
Okay. What about toes? I mean, the answer would be same, but
answer's the same.
The answer's the same. But
I don't like toes.
You know, people are cracking toes, yeah? Yeah.
I'm incapable. Like, I do not let people near my feet.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't really do it myself, but we used to have it with my brother. That he would just like super randomly wherever I was, he would just pull my toes.
And get a crack.
I felt like he wants to, make it double.
Wow.
Double, like, but it never felt like too bad after. It's just he had to sometimes pull very hard to actually make the crack. Yeah, but
that's I mean,
my toes that's a story itself. It's all messed from all the injuries.
Okay.
So they all go to a different direction.
Okay.
Like all of them.
Okay.
Okay. You had something else towards this?
In terms of self-cracking?
No. Generally.
And generally? No, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know if you wanted to ask. You asked everything about rock climbing.
Well, not everything, but everything that came into my mind.
Okay.
I wanted to ask more about your training.
Okay.
Like how you train, what you consider good training, and maybe also not necessarily, reps and sets, even though we can talk about it as well, but more like a training philosophy.
Okay. So again, I just moved recently, so everything that has to do with training is a little bit up in the air right now. I don't have a very specific routine right now. But before I came here, I was doing CrossFit, and I was doing CrossFit 3 times a week. I actually even upped it to 4 times a week, but I found that it was too much for the body. I do find CrossFit to be a very hardcore sport. So again, I hope I don't get many haters here, but I did feel like it took quite a bit of a toll.
As a sport,
Yeah.
I find it extreme.
Yeah.
Not hardcore, but extreme. As a training methodology, that's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was doing it 4 times a week, and it was definitely too much on the body, simply because I feel like the body didn't have enough time to rest. And what I would do when I was doing 3 times a week, generally it would be like 2 WODs and then 1 weightlifting session, or 1 WOD and then 1 weightlifting and 1 gymnastics. So I always think that it's very important to not just do the movement mindlessly, but to really learn how to do it properly, which is why I really like the weightlifting sessions, because we got the analysis from the coaches. We learned how to do things properly. And then the gymnastics, just to really work more with your own body weight. Like, for example, the handstands, the handstand push-ups, calisthenics. Basically it's calisthenics, right? So that is in reference to CrossFit. Like, generally I do try to get 3 to 4 times of training a week, just because I feel that it's the minimum we can do for our body. I mean, the week has so many hours. You have so many hours where you're always sitting in front of the computer or working at the desk for most people. And I think movement is essential. So 3 to 4 hours for me is good a week. I know some people will take that further up. I mean, before I did CrossFit, I was doing trail running, and I would do 7 hours a week. But it's a completely different sport. So I was doing endurance back then. I also needed to rest, obviously. But the training sessions were longer. Yeah.
And when you did the endurance, have you had some supplementary strength training into it? Or there was like it's running, so I just run?
Back then, no, I was just running. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm sports savvy. Like, I don't know everything about the world of sports, and especially back then I was just trail running, so I didn't think of complementing it with strength training or weightlifting.
And you had no problems, no injuries, no overuse?
No, okay. None whatsoever. Okay.
Because that's when usually people start to think like, okay, maybe I can, change something, when it's too far,
I mean, right now, what I'm trying to do is to always balance the cardio. So for example, high intensity interval training or skipping rope, etc., with some strength training. I think that's ideal to find the balance between the two. But I think going to a specific coach that can help you with that is a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. For anything, right?
Yeah.
As you don't want to, even however unpopular the opinion might be, and it's in every field, you have people who are not really making a good name for the field, as you have definitely, only chiropractors who just crack you mindlessly and take the money. You have also coaches who don't really know what they are actually doing. They just, it was somehow working for them, so they're somehow trying to do the same for you.
Yeah.
But and everybody can be coach for themselves, that's
Yeah.
I mean that as ironically as I can, because as much as self-cracking is not the best thing you can do for yourself, also self-training, especially when you have a little bit more specific goal, is just going to take you so far. It's not going to
that's
do
the
the job.
thing. So essentially, I've always self-trained, or the closest I've been trained by others is with CrossFits, where I had good coaches in Spain. I really like them. But it is also true that one of the things I don't like about CrossFit is when you do lots of weighted repetitions, you lose the form. And I thought that that's really not good for the body. So it's one of the things I didn't like about CrossFit. I think that when you do the weight, you have to specifically focus on the movement, on doing it correctly, and not to try and get, 30 repetitions in a specific time.
I mean, yeah, that's what I said at the beginning, that's why CrossFit as a sport and CrossFit as a methodology are completely different. Mm-hmm. Because obviously in sport, you need to measure something. Mm-hmm. And in CrossFit, aesthetics is not part of it. How you do it, at the end, how you do the squat doesn't matter if you are below the parallel and if you extend it at the top. Mm-hmm. Anything in between, in competition, is disregarded. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares until you touch the knee to the floor. But, I mean, come on, It happens on some front squats. You know what I mean? So that's why, and that's also something I'm trying to push. And I know many people around me, and definitely everybody who I was coaching has at least better, if not full, understanding towards this philosophy that you can do it for time, mm-hmm. but never on cost of the quality.
Yes.
The intensity is absolutely integral part of the training that needs to be there. Mm-hmm. Without the intensity, you don't really have any change, because it really matters if you do 15 push-ups in 15 seconds mm-hmm. or in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. That power output, work for time, is very different. Mm-hmm. So the intensity needs to be there. But if you do it wrong and you mess up your body, like, what's the point?
What's the point? Exactly.
Yeah. So there needs to be a certain balance. Or then do extremely high intensity if you want to, mm-hmm. on what Julian from StrongFit is talking about, is low WES exercises. Mm-hmm. WES is WES. That means W for weight bearing mm-hmm. on the spine, E stands for eccentric, mm-hmm. and S stands for skill. Mm-hmm. So low weight bearing on the spine, low eccentric, mm-hmm. and low skill. Assault bike. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Go as hard as you want to. Mm-hmm. But if you have high eccentric, like deadlifts or yoke, that would be more weight bearing, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're higher on this scale, where the skill is higher, the load on the spine is higher, mm-hmm. don't push as hard on the intensity there, because first of all, you're not going to be able to, and it will mess you up.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting guide. That's why I love the prowlers, just because you can just go forever, And the only limit is how hard it hurts. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll do some training now.
Awesome.
We can do some training. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
And probably not the last time. I say to everybody, but I will just make a list of people who were questions here, and then we'll go over again.
Awesome. Maybe in like 3 years' time, like, okay, how's your life now? How did things change? How do you feel?
How's the cracking going?
How's the cracking? Exactly. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.